Welcome everybody to our Come Talk with GSA event in March. So this event is going to be a special event. We have a panel of people instead of just one expert this week or this month. So we're very excited about that. So just to start off, I'd like to introduce our mental health experts that are sitting on our panel. If you all could just wave when I introduce you, that would be great. First off, we have Dr. Jennifer Whitney. She is the director of the Counseling Center. And we have Dr. Randy Patterson. She is the assistant director of the Counseling Center. Then we have Jamie Stevens. You guys might remember from 2 weeks ago, she came to our meeting and talked to us about the QPR training. She is the coordinator for outreach and peer education here at UNCG. Then we have Dr. Dayna Touron. She is the assistant dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and the professor of psychology and a professor of psychology. And then we have Dr. Jennifer Cannon, and she is the Nicholas A. Vacc Counseling and Counseling Clinic Director, and also a clinical assistant professor. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Whitney right away. She is going to discuss the results from the Student Affairs survey that was sent out, I believe, last month or a couple of weeks ago. So go ahead and take the floor, Dr. Whitney. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I like introducing Dayna as the psychology professor. I think that works. So yes,
I wouldn't get away with that with all audiences, but
this one, right?
Today.
You are the psychology professor here on this panel. So you're right, Lexi, thank you. So we did send it out. Well, part of it went out in February and part of it went out in March. And we're currently kind of pulling apart some of the data. So I have some key findings that are looking at our students overall and then pulling out some really interesting things about graduate students. And, you know, kind of the process and the bureaucracy of higher ed. What will happen now is a report will go to the vice chancellors and in particular, looking at the student affairs and then the academic affairs, right? Because those are the two big pots of feedback that came out of the survey. And then once, you know, kind of the leadership has a chance to digest it, they'll go sort of on like a dog and pony show where they'll present their findings. And so that might be something that you all would be interested in inviting them back. And by them, I'm referring to George Still, who is the director of assessment in the Division of Student Affairs, and Kathy Akins, who is our Student Affairs Vice Chancellor. And my guess, they did a dog and pony show for the I Belong survey, where they kind of presented and showed pretty graphs and things like that. And so I imagine that it would be something similar to that. And I spoke with George yesterday and he said he would be happy to come back if you wanted to take a deeper dive. But I will share with you today kind of some information that we already have. In a lot of ways, it's not surprising. It certainly wasn't surprising to me from a mental health perspective. What we know about our students in general is that stress and anxiety is high and depression is high. Those are our biggest kind of hits or concerns for our students. And what we know nationally and what we know on UNCG's campus is that those increased during the pandemic. And so there were some questions that specifically said, you know, are you less stressed? Are you about the same stressed? Are you more or significantly more stressed, you know, during the pandemic? And so the first question was around stress and anxiety, and 80% of graduate student respondents indicated that they were more or significantly more stressed and anxious during the pandemic than they were prior to the pandemic. So 80%, I mean, that's overwhelming. Similar question was for depression. And 64% of graduate students said that they were more or significantly more stressed. Maybe I should be going up because the stress level is going up, the depression level is going up. So 64% were more depressed or significantly more depressed during the pandemic than previous to the pandemic. And then the last one, and again, that's not surprising, is loneliness, right? So that was a specific one that we asked about during the pandemic, and 70% of graduate student responders indicated that they were more lonely or significantly more lonely during the pandemic. And actually, when you tease out those responses, so stress and anxiety, depression and loneliness, graduate students were actually more likely than undergraduate students to report elevated levels of stress. And, you know, I don't think that doesn't surprise me. I see some heads nodding, and perhaps that doesn't surprise you either, but we certainly, you know, we still have undergrads living on campus. There is, while there is less of a community, there is communal living happening. And, you know, folks aren't separated in the same way that maybe grad students are. So that was something that stuck out to me. Another really positive thing that stuck out when you compare grad students to undergrads were grad students were more likely than undergrads to report that their faculty were committed to their success. And so grad students were really reporting that their faculty were working with them, were being flexible and helping them to succeed. Where on the undergrad side, we got some mixed reviews as far as how faculty were working with students. And then there was another big response that really stuck out for grad students, which was our parents, our grad students who are parents. Again, not surprising, as a parent myself, I can say, this makes sense. But those students who are parents said that it had a significant impact on their ability to be a student. And so the idea of, you know, being a student, doing online and distance learning, also supporting their children, if they were school-age children in that online and distance learning, meant that they had significantly less time to devote to their own classes. And so that was something that stood out. And there was one more I was going to look. I highlighted here. Give me 1 second. Almost 90% of students reported a reduction in interactions with others in the past year. So again, that fits along the loneliness. And there was another one where graduate students in particular talked about, here it is. 80.6% of students reported worrying about the health of a loved one as a result of the pandemic. And that's graduate and undergraduate. That's 80.6% of all students that responded to the survey. But graduate students were more likely than undergraduate students to be concerned about loved ones. So that came out as higher, more elevated for our grad students than it did for our undergraduate students. So I'd just like to open it up maybe for a second for any questions or reactions, or if there were specific pieces of the data that you remembered, like I filled out that survey and they asked about this, what was the result around that? I'm happy to look through and field anything.
Megan has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Meg.
Thanks, Lex. So I'm really interested in that kind of piece where you mentioned, Jennifer, how grad students, and at least in this data, showed that they were more concerned about a loved one in this case. And I guess I'm just wondering here, because there was no follow-up question, is it specifically related to COVID or just the general lonely, like kind of those mental health aspects, or if it was the election? Do you feel like that could be dug into a little bit deeper? Because I do know that those are so intertwined these days. I guess, yeah, for me, that's a specific intertwinedness, but I'm wondering if that's going to be different between those groups.
That's great. Well, and I think, right, Randy and I have been on our own dog and pony show. And, you know, we talk a lot about there are multiple layers and multiple pandemics that are impacting us at this time. And certainly racial violence and the, you know, repeated exposure via media and social media, with how violent and the images that we've seen. And of course, that violence is not new, but the way it was experienced in particular, last spring, last summer, but continuing into this year. Of course, as you mentioned, the election and how the polarization of our nation and what we call, our culture wars and our political wars and the ways that we are responding or the narrative that is being spun. And so there wasn't, as you point out, any follow-up questions, but there were some open-ended questions. And as I was just pulling up some different to see if there was any follow-up questions, the way they asked that question, Megan, around the loved ones was specific to like in this time of the pandemic, and they were referring to the COVID pandemic. Of course, we don't know when someone answered, were they also factoring in the other components? But when it comes to the data that we were able to capture, because at the end, it just asked for any sort of narrative that grad students or students in general that were responding to the survey wanted to add. And that might be a place where we can go back and see, were there any comments specific that maybe teased that out?
I have a question, Dr. Whitney. Are they planning to redo this like exact same survey like in a year or next semester from now?
That's a great question. So one of the things that they did specific in this survey was that they used questions that mirrored existing surveys that we do give on an ongoing basis. So there's a survey called the NSSE survey, which is it's NSSE, and it's about the student experience. There's the CC survey, CECE, that's the I Belong survey. There's the Healthy Minds survey, which is a lot about mental health. And then there's the NCHA survey, which is about health more broadly defined, but mental health is, obviously a component of that, the most important component, if you will. They pulled and mirrored to create this survey so that we could compare data. And those other surveys that I just mentioned are ones that we give on an ongoing basis. I don't imagine that we will give this exact survey because it was specific to the pandemic, but we will continue in a cyclical fashion to do these other ones that I mentioned.
Does anybody else have any questions about the survey before we move on?
May I ask a question, Lexi? Can you hear me? Okay. Dr. Whitney, I'm always into tips and resilience. I think what I missed in this survey is a question to us about, guys, how did you survive it? Or what is your tip of being resilient? Because I think we are, but I don't know, in the pandemic, we don't admit it. And I think this is what we hope from the survey information is, okay, how to help and sharing like maybe experiences or best practices, or realizing the innovation, how graduate students were really innovative in overcoming this challenge.
Yeah, that's really great. I know a lot of times surveys really pull out the problems, right? And then we extrapolate from the problems what we believe are the ways that folks are being resilient or are the solutions. But as you point out, Nagla, there's no reason we can't be asking that right at the time that we're surveying around the problems. Yeah.
I love that point, and it would be such good information to be able to put out there and share.
Well, I know this is a little different, but actually with one of my graduate students, I'm in the counselor education department. We just analyzed our data for a study that we did looking around how mindfulness has impacted, granted it's counselor trainees, but master's level students' anxiety and depression related to COVID. And that is something we asked, if you're practicing mindfulness or you have coping skills, what's been helping you? And that was one of the things that we saw astoundingly great results around is mindfulness practice, having an animal around to hang out with, things like, again, connecting the best you can, right? We talked about isolation and loneliness in that survey. And so granted, it's a different population, But I think adding to that mental health and that well-being place of what can we do to really be positive in terms of mindfulness or other, coping skills that we can use at this time.
Yeah, and to be able to really tease that out. And there's so much data about what we do know, what coping skills work. And then I also like to always differentiate and now that you use the term resilient, and I think without a doubt, we as individuals, bring coping skills to the table. We are called to be resilient. There is something known as post-traumatic stress growth, right? So ways that we go through these really difficult and challenging experiences. And when we come out of them and at the other end, we can look back and say, gosh, I didn't know I was that strong. That's often what you hear people say. Or, gosh, I learned that. I didn't think I could survive that, but I did. And as a result, I realized I'm so much tougher, stronger than I was, right? So there are ways that we grow even when we're experiencing challenges. And so, I'm sorry, I just got distracted by the comment, Megan. I'm like, okay, I really identify with that. Great. I like good comments. I'm going to be interrupted by those. And so I love that. And I also want to say we need to be talking about the systems and ways that the systems are set up or are not set up for our success. And that doesn't have to be your fight, right? That's not what I'm saying in this, but that is something that certainly we are always cognizant of and working on as staff members to say, what are ways that this structure supports or does not support our students and their success? Because the answer can't be, in my opinion, just be more resilient and get more coping, right? That's just never going to work.
I have a
or I
comment,
mean, it might, but I'm sorry, what?
I was just saying I have a comment, not a question, but Nagla and I are constantly advocating for how different graduate students are from undergraduate. So I think we really appreciate this survey data just because we can say, see, because we're affected by so many different things in undergrads. And of course, undergrads are affected a great deal as well. But yeah, I think it will be great once we can get that data in our hands and really show it to all of the graduate students and make them know that they're not alone in this too.
Yeah, that validation is really important. And exactly ways that graduate students rely on funding or rely on lab space and were labs available or open or closed, right? And I see Megan nodding. I see her in her lab right now, right? And so those are ways that grad students were differently and specifically impacted that undergrads maybe weren't.
Well, thank you so much for that survey result, Dr. Whitney. I would just like to open it up a little bit now and talk about all of the resources that we have at UNCG counseling wise, and we can drop a couple links in the chat just to make everybody aware of everything that we have for them at UNCG.
I was ready for that. I just put in Instagram. I was like, I'm just going to hit it at the right minute.
That's awesome.
Ooh, go Jennifer. Also, I'm going to just take this moment to say that I'm running a workshop tomorrow for grad students on how to have a healthy relationship with your advisor, 3 o'clock. You can find the link at, and I will know by tomorrow at 3 how to do that. But yes, you can find the link on our webpage. I know, it's okay. I'm keeping it a secret.
So that's on the, wish I had that workshop.
Right? Yeah.
Randy, can you record the workshop for us? We have appointments at that time. Do you record it?
I can.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I make no promises that it'll be perfect, but you can certainly go back and watch it. I will give it to you.
Dr. I just want to note on that. I have been receiving emails since I've been publicizing that event tomorrow, asking if it will be recorded. So it sounds like a lot of students want to come, but they're not able to come at the time. So you have the recording. If you want to share it with me, I would love to share it with our graduate student network.
Great. I'll be happy to do that. And I think just in line with talking about resilience, I think there's a real reason over this last year, even though we've been bumping up our services that really name that they're grad student specific for the last couple of years. But this last year, you know, we've gone from having one grad student support group to two. We've run really a series of about 5 grad student workshops, you know, about self-care, work-life balance is coming, thanks to Lexi, about imposter syndrome, adjusting to graduate school. So we're really trying to, those services are there for graduate students. And again, I think they've been really utilized this year in a different way because of that isolation. The support groups have been just phenomenal and critically important, I think. And just a reminder for grad students that all of the counseling center services are available to them. And I think sometimes that's been lost in the past, that, you know, stress management groups, that's all available to grad students. But we also have these specific offerings. Dayna, you're going to talk.
Well, one thing that I'd like to add to that is really that I think in addition to there being maybe a heightened need, it seems to me like there's also a heightened awareness. And that in part has been because of, you know, the graduate school, I think, has done more to make these events visible. I think that your offices, I mean, as overworked as the counseling center is, I think that you guys have done a really good job of making these services and their availability to graduate students much more visible and much more aware. And I'd be really interested either now or just privately, if people want to send me a message in knowing how the graduate student perspective on how they become aware of these services and whether they perceive a lack of awareness, because the faculty and staff perspective on this isn't always going to be accurate. And so for us to know how best to reach graduate students, either the ones who are very involved already, or maybe the students who aren't, like how do we reach them and how do we make them aware of services so that we can help support everyone.
Megan had a question.
Thank you, Lexi. Yes, I'm just gonna shamelessly plug that I'm currently launching, and it's active right now, a national resources and policy survey that's really assessing graduate and professional students' perceptions of resources and policies available at their institutions. So it's happening, and I am writing a report on that data as soon as I kind of get enough data collection to make that statistically significant. I'll drop a link in the chat, because although it's a little bit longer than, say, your 5-minute survey, if you can give me that data, I can give you that report that helps us better give graduate schools ways that we can tell students what those resources are. So I will drop that in a second. Please fill it out. You're the bomb. Thank you.
That's awesome. I think that's something I love this conversation, because being the director now of the Nicholas A. Vacc Clinic, like I'm new here, and I feel like, you know, in my program, I actually worked at the counseling center as an intern under Dr. Whitney. And so to be back here is great, but I feel like people don't even know we exist and what we do. And so I know I put our links for the Vacc Clinic in the chat box. We are offering free groups right now for students and community members around coping with COVID, support, mindfulness and wellness-based groups. And then every Wednesday from 12 to 1, we do a Wellness Wednesday where people can Zoom in. If people choose face-to-face, we've got socially distanced, spaced out spaces, but we do coloring, meditation, mindfulness type stuff. If you're there, you get to enjoy the essential oils we have going with the aromatherapy. But we also are working really hard just to let people know, like, we have resources and we want to share them. So we've revamped our website. I put the link to the actual resources section where we have tons of resources. I personally love to watch the zoo cameras when I'm a little stressed. And so tons of great stuff, but I think the best thing we can do is word of mouth, because as I think the studies are showing, as even those results earlier, people are stressed, they're anxious, they're depressed, they're isolating. We know this is happening, but people don't know where to go to get the services they need. So I really appreciate being a part of this. And if we can do anything at the Vacc Clinic, which we're located in the Ferguson building, please let us know, because our goal is to really provide affordable and accessible care for students and community members.
Dr. Cannon, I have a question for you off of that. So I'm not familiar with like your area of the counseling. So I was really excited to have you come on the call today. So I know a flyer that I sent out to graduate students said the counselors in training. Could you explain a little bit more? Is that graduate students usually that people would be visiting? Just kind of more information on that?
Yeah, thank you, Lexi, for asking that. So I think we do differentiate from some of the other clinics on campus and centers in the sense that we do have our counselors are primarily in training. And so we've got master's level students and we have doctoral level students. And so if you're in the counselor education department, you have to go through an advanced practicum at our clinic where you see clients. And so in the spring, it's typically master's level students that are supervised by our doc students that are then supervised by our faculty, which are then supervised by me. And so we've got a range of expertise to make sure that we are making sure our clients are getting the best care they can. And if it's like a really acute or a really traumatic thing or something that happened, we might refer you out in this first session, but we're really doing our best to make sure that our counselors actually meeting where the students' development and the client's needs are. However, in the fall, we take people who are maybe struggling a little bit more because we know we have doctoral trained students that are then supervised. And so that's kind of that counselor and training piece is that we're not, well, I am, but not everyone that sees people are licensed, but our supervisors are.
And Dr. Cannon, can UNCG staff benefit from the counseling clinic?
Absolutely. So we're actually working with UNCG to try to figure out how we can do some EAP programs possibly. But yeah, we welcome staff, faculty, family members. We do individual counseling, couple counseling, group counseling. And like I said, we do some wellness workshops and things along that, as well as going in and doing presentations and consultation stuff. And so, yeah, we are open to the community as well as the UNCG, well, the community at large, as well as UNCG. So yes, we absolutely can help faculty and staff, administrative people as well. And I'll just plug one more thing. So on our website, but then also on the Instagram page, it's got our sliding scale. And so we will never charge more than $30 for a full hour session. If you're a UNCG affiliate, a student, it's typically $5 a session for students. And then it's $5 based on a sliding scale. And so again, it's off of household income, and there's a sheet on our Insta that kind of shows that, but we are open to everyone, and most sessions are like $5, maybe 10. And then if you are a current student enrolled in a class that you may need extra credit for, we'll take you and we'll give you 4 free sessions for things like that. And as I mentioned earlier, all of our groups right now are free just because we see there's a need for some of this stuff and we don't want to create barriers. And so faculty and staff are also welcome in that. And yeah, if you have questions, just let us know.
I have a question for all of you. If you could just kind of address in your specific departments, the types of counseling that are available. So whether you're doing online counseling, in-person counseling, group counseling in person, just to give a quick rundown of that.
So I'll share about the counseling center. The counseling center located in Student Health Services Gove. We are doing primarily virtual telemental health, right? So in the greatest of caution for our students, for our staff, we are engaged in telemental health. We do have spaces. So again, kind of speaking to Jennifer Cannon's barriers, right? One of the things we were aware of from the get-go was, would people have access to the technology, to the bandwidth, to the internet, to private spaces? And so with part of the way that we're working is that students can come into the center to use our technology, to use our internet, or to use a private space. So we are offering that as well. So for folks who have roommates or who have family or maybe who have spotty internet, right? That can help them accessing our services. We are still operating on site. And so for students who are in crisis and referred up from our medical clinic or maybe referred over by another staff member or brought over by our university police department, again, there are things that are happening on site, but even when it's on site, we are primarily telemental health. And we're very aware that given the staff size and given the demand, that if one of our providers goes offline, that's a really big impact to our ability to serve students. So again, we've been really operating out of an abundance of caution, but by the fall, we're really anticipating that things will look different and will look more traditional. I think the vaccine clinics that are going on campus, the FEMA clinic, the Guilford, we're making great strides. So I feel hopeful that fall might look a little bit more traditional. And then I'm going to thank you all so much. I have to pick up my small child from daycare. And so Randy is an expert in all things counseling center, and I thank you. Thanks for including me.
Thanks for coming, Dr. Whitney.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So similar, if I can jump in after Dr. Whitney, the Vacc clinic right now is using telemental health. So we're doing everything where our trainees are actually in our building for immediate crisis service with our crisis supervisors. But the students and the clients in the community are using their computers to Skype in or their phones to Zoom in, I'm sorry. But in the fall, we're hoping to do a hybrid. The only thing that we are doing kind of face-to-face right now is our Wellness Wednesday. And so we've got the space where we've limited to 8 people in the building. And when the weather is allowing, we go outside. And so we're trying to do the best we can to help people connect while, keeping our distance. And we have very stringent cleaning policies that we're using for everyone in our clinic right now. And so we do telehealth, but we do group counseling, individual counseling, we do family counseling, we do child counseling, like play therapy, and we do group family counseling. Yeah. So we do it all. We come from a more holistic wellness-based model. We don't do diagnoses. We may work with you if a previous one, we may refer you out if you need one. And so that's something, just because we are a training clinic and we don't bill insurance, so we try to keep the fees low or free, that we don't do. But other than that, we are more than happy to see people here, especially if they're struggling. And we know that that's happening across our campus and our communities.
Well, thank you so much. If any of the other panelists need to leave, please feel free. Otherwise, I do have a couple more questions that I would like to address with you all. So Dr. Touron, maybe you could address this. I know that you're very involved in the conversations of mental health resources at UNCG. Could you give us a little bit of like a sneak peek, an inside view on things UNCG is trying to do now to support students?
Well, I really think that one of the things that we're trying to do right now is to foster awareness, especially among graduate students. I think that Randy and Jennifer probably have taken that ball and run with it, and have really added a lot of workshops and a lot of availability with what is pretty limited bandwidth, I think. And so I think it's been a really impressive improvement. And I think having that awareness, trying to encourage, at least on the graduate student level, trying to educate faculty about, and directors of graduate studies about, the need to check in on students, to make them aware of the resources so that they can pass that information along, to try to improve their confidence, I think, a bit in having these conversations, so that they can, let students know. I think sometimes faculty, especially in departments where mental health care is not part of what they do, people can be a little bit afraid to have those conversations. So instead, to point people to resources, to be willing to, say, I care about you, and it seems like you might be struggling. If that's the case, here are some resources that are available to you, and to encourage students to do that. And so I think there's both the piece of trying to make those resources available to graduate students, but there's also the identifying specific students in need and encouraging them to get help. There are training programs that have been going on around campus to try to improve that awareness among faculty more broadly as well. And if Greg Bell is still on the call, Greg can speak perhaps more specifically to the things that the graduate school is doing. I know that they've added to the graduate student orientation information about mental health and wellness. One of the conversations that I think is happening and needs to happen is this sort of in-between state that graduate students often find themselves in, where they're both students, but they're also often instructors or working in research labs with undergraduates. And so I think, and teaching. And so really graduate students are hit with this kind of double whammy of how to adjust as a student to pandemic situations, but how to adjust as an instructor, as a lab mate, as a mentor of undergraduates in this situation, and how to provide resources to undergraduates that might be in their classrooms. And so I think kind of fostering a recognition of all of those, specific types of issues that graduate students are encountering is I think the first step in being able to address them.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love to hear that, because I think that's a lot of feedback we get from graduate students, especially during the pandemic, is my professor, my advisor isn't being lenient. They're having really strict deadlines. They're not understanding how this is affecting us. So yeah, I think the most training that we can offer, and even if it becomes required at some point for those program directors, for graduate students and just advisors, if they could take that, that would be awesome.
And I think some departments do a good job of having like an ombudsman or some sort of type of system like that to address those issues, and others have more informal structures, and figuring out where those needs are so that they can be met, I think is one of the challenges we have right now. Randy, were you about to say something?
Just to jump in, because it's a lot of faculty or several faculty members who have been talking to us about the needs that they were seeing from students, and so we were working with some folks to come up with resources for faculty to do things like, a syllabus statement that is mental health affirmative, to do, a policy that has like opt-out passes. So we put together a landing page with a lot of resources for faculty, staff that I think are also really relevant for grad instructors, TAs, for here's how to take care of yourself. Here's how to help our students, the students that you're teaching. So I am putting the link to that webpage.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you, Randy. And again, this is something that's personally important to me. And I've had conversations with Randy and with Jen and with Greg about these issues because I coordinate the graduate programs in arts and sciences, which is a lot of our graduate programs. And, I feel like every time something comes up, I feel like the counseling center is like immediately figuring out how to address this. And so I think them being aware of these issues is just, these issues don't fall on deaf ears. They really want to help the students. And again, with the limited bandwidth they have, I find it just incredibly impressive how much they've done.
I just have to acknowledge you, as well as Dr. Bell and Dean Burke, for really giving a push and saying, what's happening for grad students. So helping us to kind of move forward. So I appreciate that, as well as everybody else's work.
And just so everybody knows on the call, I am saving all of these resources that are being posted in the chat, and I'm going to put them all together, and they'll be sent out to graduate students along with the link to this recording.
And so I posted the link to the psychology clinic on campus, but I think for most students, the first stop will be going to the counseling center on campus. And so I think given the nature of the types of issues that students are facing right now, and just the ease really of getting help through that resource, I wouldn't really put that up as necessarily an alternative. I think it's another resource that is there for upon referral, which I think is often what happens. And yeah, I think, the biggest thing I would like to say here is, as graduate students and as GSA, I just want you to make us aware, make me aware if there are issues in arts and sciences. If there are things you need, know that there are people on campus who want to support those needs. And so I think the knowing that there are people eager to help is one thing that I can offer. You can always email me. I will try to pass it along and try to facilitate whatever programming can help.
I
want to reiterate the idea that so much of this is about the awareness, right? We are so fortunate to be a campus full of resources. And it's just, I know as a two-time Spartan here, I did my undergrad and my graduate work here. I didn't know I had access to free counseling. I just didn't know. I also didn't know that I was living with depression, anxiety. And so I can look back and think like, oh, this awareness is just taking me so far at this point in my life, but it would have been really amazing to have known all of this earlier. So that's a big piece of my work. I'm definitely more the non-clinical side of mental health, but just really making sure that folks know that, that mental health matters here at UNCG. This is going to be a conversation that we have out loud. We're not going to talk about it like this. And we really do have to change the culture. And I think we're making just huge strides in that direction. And I'm so encouraged to hear all these great resources that were not there when I was a first-year student living on the quad. So I'm just thrilled to have these conversations. A big part of my job is coordinating mental health outreach for Mental Health Month in September. So, and I'm experiencing some champions here, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of it. And I hope some of you are around over the summer so I can pick your brains.
I just want to echo you, Jamie. First of all, and the prevention work you all do is fantastic, but I want to just invite people to also be in touch with me or with Jen or probably any of us. But if you're thinking like, this is what we need, or we need a workshop on this, I can't say we will always be able to do it, but we will really try to find a way to do it. So don't hesitate to be in touch. Or if you think here's a way you could let students know about this, be in touch with me. Put my email.
And I know like the graduate school has added these, oh, I'm so sorry, Jennifer. So they've added this orientation that I think could be very helpful for awareness. If those of you who have experienced that, definitely, if you have suggestions for how that can be better, I know that they want this to be helpful. So reach out to them or to me and we'll get that message sent along.
I mean, to jump on you. No, and I'll second that. I mean, at the Vacc clinic, we're always sending out polls and surveys and seeing what's needed. We just did a healthy relationships workshop in February. And so again, we are doing our best to provide services we know and we have, but also what does the community need? So we're constantly assessing to see what we can do. So if you have ideas or things that you would like to be done, I think, I don't want to speak for everyone, but going off what Randy said, we're more than happy to. I know I am, and my staff would love to provide as many services as we can to students, faculty, community members, anyone that needs it.
Thank you all. I just wanted to point out really quick while we're talking about different workshops. We have listened to graduate students. They've come to us and said, we need these things. So we are going to be hosting a combating imposter syndrome workshop that is going to be with Dr. Brown. And then we're also doing a Breathe, Find Work-Life Balance in Grad School. And that's with our very own Dr. Patterson here on our call. So both of those are going to be during GSA, that's Graduate Student Appreciation Week. It's April 6th through 9th. I just dropped the link in the chat. There's a whole bunch of fun workshops happening that week. And like those two workshops that I just mentioned. So make sure you put those on your calendars. Something else I wanted to, mention really quick is that I've talked to Dr. Whitney and Dr. Patterson about creating some type of video that could go out to departments during like the orientation thing that could basically teach people not even resources, but just the awareness of different mental health. I don't know, though, I'm losing my words here, but just being able to notice if somebody is going through a mental health crisis, how to address that appropriately, knowing that we are not counselors, we're not trying to be counselors, but we're able to reach out and support those people in their time of need and just give them the resources that we have on campus. So that was something I was really interested in, having the counselor or somebody from the counseling center come to our department and give a talk, because as we know, graduate students are usually reached by undergrads probably more than professors are. We're closer in age to them. They feel more comfortable with us. We work really hands-on with them in lab settings. So just even me personally, knowing how to respond to somebody telling me they're in a mental health crisis would take a huge weight off of my back, just being concerned about that.
Yeah, I know Jen does a ton of those. We have presentations, so we can just record one. That would be easy, and we'd love to.
I think that would be great to share with all departments. And if it could, we have things that are required of departments every semester, required every year. If that could just be, everybody has to watch this training video on mental health, I would love that.
And also just a reminder for grad students who are teaching that we are there as a consultant service too. So when you have that student who is, you're really worried about, who's come to you because they do trust you and look up to you, remember that you can, reach out to us and say, this feels like more than I am comfortable with, and we'll talk you through it.
No, I hate that I keep piggybacking on you, Randy, but we do that as well at the Vacc clinic. And something too is we go in the community and do it. So some of our high schools and different workplaces and stuff. And so if you know people who would benefit from that, that maybe isn't necessarily just in our UNCG community, we do offer those services with the consulting, as well as how do you see the triggers, warning signs, and then get people to appropriate resources.
I wanted to plug a workshop I've got coming up next Wednesday. We're doing a Wellbeing Wednesday series, and I'm our resident aromatherapist in the Kaplan Center for Wellness, which is fun because it's just this other tool I bring to the table. And sometimes I feel like it's how I sneak these mental health conversations in sometimes when they don't necessarily see it coming. And again, I will always say that this is not the end all be all. This is just another tool for the toolbox. And this coming week, the workshop is specific for sleep. So folks can come out and enjoy a variety of blends and essential oils, and you will get to make your own aromatherapy product to take home and enjoy as you would like.
Yeah, just put this in chat, but Jamie mentioned that in our meeting 2 weeks ago, and I saw graduate students just like, what, aromatherapy works? Yeah, they got really excited about that. So, and also for the 4 of you that are left on this call, if you have workshops that you need help publicizing, we send out, the Graduate Student Association sends out newsletters all of the time with events and stuff on them. So just shoot me an email. You have my email. I've been emailing you relentlessly. So just share that with me, send me the link, send me a flyer. I would love to help you get that out.
And I need to get to my next meeting, but thank you all for inviting me. Thank you so much, Lexi, and thank you for holding these events. And again, consider me, jot down my name, consider me a resource. I'm always, I can't always help directly, but I can usually, try to figure out who can. So, especially, as graduate students, please reach out if you need anything. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Dr. Touron.
And I know we're probably wrapping up soon. It was nice to meet you. I think something too, I just want to share is like, my specialty is around holistic healing and wellness. And I think one of the misconceptions is that self-care needs to be long and it's expensive and you have to go to the spa. And so really I do a 60-second mindfulness minute every Monday. I post it on my private Instagram. I connect it to our Vacc clinic here. But I think just literally when you find yourself telling yourself, I don't have time for this, I can't do it, that's when you need it most. And so I would encourage you, even if it's 60 seconds, 60 minutes, whatever it is, step out, figure out what your non-negotiables are. What are the things that you are doing when your mental health is at its best? So you can see when they're sliding and start to incorporate ways to increase them. And so again, I would say every little thing adds up, and it doesn't have to be some long, I love yoga, but you don't have to go to yoga. It's a step away and just do a breathing exercise, which I find as I'm 8 months pregnant and my baby's pushing on me, I need to breathe a little deeper. But things like that, I think, are misconceptions, especially when you have your work life, your school life, you have 50 different hats on as a graduate student. And so if you are telling yourself you don't have time, you need it more. So step away for even 60 seconds, get some sunshine, do what you need.
Let me also toss out that Piney Lake is opening back up this weekend. And if you have not been out to Piney Lake, you simply must. It is just, you feel like you are a million miles away from everything. And it is just such a peaceful experience to be out by the lake. And we like to do lots of fun activities out there. And just the fresh air is so nice. So I hope people will take advantage of that coming up.
Well, we are getting ready to wrap up here. So panelists, do you have any last information you would like to share? your favorite resource for graduate students, or like Dr. Cannon was saying, your favorite recommendation for students to just kind of get their mental health under control.
And I gave you a set of my favorite cards. And so those are one of the things I think are best. Go to a pet store, pet a dog, wear a cat, like something. I mean, anything can help you with your mental health if you truly let it be, and anything can be abused. We know this. And so I think just remember, at the end of the day, you matter, and you have to be the one taking care of you so that you can, you know, take care of others and things along those lines. And so don't forget about yourself.
Yeah, there's a boatload of great apps. One that I think it sneaks in there and you're not expecting it to be so great. It's actually for sleep. It's called Cvti Coach, and it's supposed to be used for people with insomnia, but it's a free app, and it's got a lot of nice little meditations in it and things to help you fall asleep, as well as lots of education about sleep. So that's one I suggest a lot because it has like progressive muscle relaxation and a lot of things embedded in it for free.
I want to say, not being afraid to have conversations about your mental health. That is like, I live for this. I live for these conversations, and I am always happy to have them, be it in this kind of setting, be it one-on-one. So please jot my name down, reach out. And, you know, our mental health awareness month in September is, you know, I feel like sometimes it's me over the summer planning it, and I don't want it to be like that anymore. I want it to be this brilliant team of people at UNCG who have so much to share and just really give me hope for the future.
I love that. And I will shamelessly plug one last time. I sent it in the chat earlier, and I know, Lexi, you said you're gathering stuff, but our Vacc resource page really is amazing. I mean, it's got apps, it's got yoga, it's got music, it's got coloring, it's got zoo cams. So we literally are constantly compiling all the resources we can find so that we can do the work for you, so that you have it when you need it. And again, the more you can practice your self-care, wellness, mindfulness when you're calm, cool, and collected, the more you're going to have access to it when you really need it and your brain's shutting down. So don't be afraid to have those conversations and to practice this stuff openly.
Just one sentence on that. What everybody's saying is what I've seen as being really healing in our groups is people being able to say, like, I'm suffering and I'm struggling, and to be authentic with that. And you just see the kind of like defenses go down and people just take a breath. So I really agree with what you were saying, Jamie, like, and what you're saying, Jennifer. Don't be afraid to have those conversations and to acknowledge, like, we're all feeling a little broken a lot of the time. So just talking about that is so powerful. So thanks.
I think for me, I have a wish, because we all know the counseling center, but I think this group, including Dr. Jennifer Cannon and in the counseling center and Jamie, I wish for this to be not an ad hoc meeting. I wish for us to have a standing, like maybe committee that is whatever called. It is mental health or whatever called. I don't know which under umbrella it would be. Definitely graduate school could be like a hub for this, like group of wonderful people, because I can't imagine Randy will go back to her office, Dr. Cannon will go back to her counseling department, and Jamie is very busy with QPR. But it was my first time seeing you all with Dr. Carr, and then since then I said, Lexi, we have to have them, we have to keep them. So I think we need to you need to be kept, not in a cage, but kept by a structure or a committee where people can still see all the resources always there in a standing position. GSA is ready to do that. We can host
Like,
you.
I love it. I'm in. You got me.
When Corona is over, definitely we can have you for coffee and food from all over the world too.
Marisa, did you have a comment?
Oh, I didn't realize I was unmuted. No, it was just something that I was thinking when you spoke and you mentioned it, was just about preventative work. I'm an international student, so and I'm a doc student. So last time I studied was a long time ago, and I just don't remember this amount of stress visible in students when I was a student. And what I'm seeing so much of the stress is caused by finances and is caused by the academics. And that, I don't know, I just think that some of it could be prevented. I mean, it's great having all of these services. I'm a public health person. So what are the upstream determinants of all of this? What can we do at the university to prevent a lot of this happening? And so, you know, Lexi mentioned having those videos for maybe some of the faculty to look at and to be aware of, you know, signs and symptoms in students, but also just to, I don't know, I mean, one of the things is the amount of work they make GAs do. The number of hours and the amount of money they get paid for those hours. I just think it's a lot. It's a lot of hours for a little money. And so students are doing their GA hours, they're doing their academics, and they're working outside of school, and they're bringing up a family often. And I just think the university needs to look at some of those things and those contracts and those places to try and reduce the stress so that they don't have to always come for counselling. That's just what was on my mind when I was listening. And I mean, it's fabulous that the services that are available, but you know, my mind is, can we get in before that?
I love that. I think just being proactive is so important, and it's just such a systemic issue. And I think anything we can do to infiltrate the system and change it, whether it's academia at large or UNCG or departments, I absolutely agree with that. Having been a doctoral student here a little bit ago, it's, yeah, the struggle is real. The resources are there, but how do we get access to them before it's too late? And how do we keep our retention and our wellness where it needs to be?
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of the things we talk a lot about in the grad student support groups that I've worked with is sort of like, is our grad students not functioning within the system, or is the system not functional for grad students? And so whether it's about the financial support, whether it's about the, you know, demands, I think, you know, that piece of kind of knowing, trying to stay grounded as you walk into a system and recognize, is this system working with me, is incredibly important. I think the earlier people are thinking about that, the better.
Well, as we wrap up, I just want to point out something that I posted in chat here. So every graduate student that came to the call today is getting the recommended resource by these experts, which is a deck of 60 empowering questions and positive affirmation cards, which I was going to buy myself one, but 10 people didn't show up today. So now I get to have one, and I'm very excited about that. So thank you all so much for recommending that. I will be in touch with those graduate students on this call right after this meeting. I'll let you know where you can pick those up, and they will be available for you soon. So a big round of applause for our panelists. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you all so much for coming. I learned a lot. I'm guessing everybody else on this call learned a lot, and I'm really excited to have you all back again at some point. So thank you all very much. Thank you for coming to Come Talk with GSA. Have a great night.
Bye. Thanks, Lexi.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Lexi, do you want me to stay or go?